Welcome to this arsehole's opinion. This is my first video and we'll see how it goes, but let me introduce myself and give you some background info, including why I've called my channel what I've called it. If you don't care, I'll try and timestamp when I start talking about the game so you can skip ahead, but I think it's worth knowing who your reviewer is and why you should accept their opinion, but it's up to you. I'll also say up front that the footage you're watching is of a new game and I've deliberately tried to keep my actions fairly basic in order to avoid spoilers. So who am I and why should you care what I have to say about games? I'm not a professional reviewer or journalist, I don't have anything to do with the gaming industry. I have, however, been playing games for around 30 years now. The first game I can remember playing was Lemmings on my dad's PC. The first gaming machine I owned was an original Game Boy with Tetris and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Fall of the Foot Clan, and my love of games and gaming has only grown over time. In that time I've played hundreds of games, I've seen genres come and go, I've seen trends rise and fall, I've seen games that achieve near perfection, then seen tens of clones released in the months and years that follow. I've also read and later watched hundreds if not thousands of game reviews. I've agreed with the conclusions of many and disagreed thoroughly with others. Games are a subjective medium, and no matter how big your website is or how many magazines you print per month, a review at the end of the day is just some arsehole's opinion. And this series of reviews is this arsehole's opinion. This channel is just me on my own, playing the games and doing the reviews, so there's no question of bias. I game on PC, PS5 and Nintendo Switch. I've owned Xboxes in the past, so although I have my opinions on the benefits and drawbacks of the various systems, I'm not a fanboy of any one system. If anything, I'm a fanboy of all three that I currently own. My working plan is to review a selection of games that I think are top tier or brilliant, followed by some games that I think are great, to give anyone who cares to follow this channel an idea of my taste in games. Like I said at the outset, I'm not a professional gaming journalist. I buy the games myself and I play them like a normal human being would, a few hours at a time in the evening when I get home from work, and maybe a few extra hours on the weekend. And that's going to factor into how I rate the games. I highly doubt I'm going to be able to do what the big reviewers do, which is to get a pre-release copy, although that would be nice, and dedicate 72 hours with no sleep to playing and reviewing the game for the launch. This is a longer term look at games, and personally I think that may give a more reliable opinion. I've not fully thought through all my criteria for rating games, but certainly for games that I'm telling you are brilliant, they have to fall into one of two categories. Either I couldn't stop playing the game until I finished it and I was having fun the whole time, or it's a game that I keep going back to time and time again. So now that you've listened to all that, here's this arsehole's opinion on The Long Dark. The Long Dark is an open world survival game set on an isolated Canadian island during the winter, following an apocalyptic event leaving you as the only human survivor. Your only objective is to survive. There are two modes. Wintermute is the game's episodic story mode, which is up to 4 parts as of 2022. The world is more populated than survival mode with a small number of characters guiding you on your journey. I won't say too much about this mode as it's not what I usually play. It's good, especially as a jumping off point for new players to get to grips with the game's various systems. However, the game really shines in my opinion in survival mode, which is what I mainly play and is what has kept me coming back now for years at this stage. The gameplay mechanics are the same across both modes. There are 4 main indicators of wellness: temperature, sleepiness, thirst and hunger. The other things that can affect you are illness and injury. Each of these, if allowed to go bad, will drain your health bar and eventually kill you over time, some more quickly than others. You keep all of those things in check and you will be absolutely groovy. There is also a representation of the time of day and a scent indicator. There's always something to be keeping an eye on, some metric that you will have to act on and change your plans to take into account, and I think that's one of the things that keeps the game engaging every minute that you're playing it. You're always looking out for better gear to keep you warm, and cloth and sewing kits to keep it maintained when it gets torn during animal attacks. Clothing in poor condition doesn't keep you as warm as fully maintained clothing, and if the condition gets down to 0, the item is ruined beyond repair. Food and water are essential for survival, obviously. At times you'll find yourself spoiled for choice. At other times you may find yourself having to run the risk of developing food poisoning by eating a tin of sardines at 30% quality, or risk starvation. And that is a tough choice to make. Minor spoiler, although starvation is a slow death, there is a powerful bonus obtained if you keep your hunger level out of the red for 3 days, and you have to keep yourself out of the red to maintain it. So keep antibiotics on hand, because food poisoning and bed rest is frequently preferable to losing that bonus. With every journey you make in the game, you'll be mindful of the time of day, and have to weigh up whether you think you need to start looking for shelter, because at night, even the warmest of clothing may not keep you warm enough to survive, and each night is a long dark. You see what they did there? This brings me to my first point about why I think this is an utterly brilliant game. The systems that I've just explained are pretty straightforward, with simple icons and gauges. It's actually much deeper than it appears because it's impacted by the increasing scarcity of resources around you. In the first 100 days, you could do very well relying on only the scavenged food and resources you find, collecting firewood along the way to boil water, and raiding every cupboard, shelf and smashed vending machine you can find for food. But at some point towards the end of that 100 days, it'll dawn on you that you've scavenged pretty much everything there is. And even worse, if you have a store of food in one of your hideaways, it's all perishable, and it's slowly going off. This means that if you haven't done so already, you'll need to change up your survival tactics to become quite a bit more aggressive towards your animal companions, or enemies, on the island, and start hunting or fishing for the basic necessities of survival. In that sense, there's an evolution of the tactics required to survive, if never really thrive, in the Long Dark's wilderness setting. My second point is the setting itself. This may be personal for me, as I've always loved the snow and ice, and this includes ice leveling games. The look of them anyway. Any game that includes a slippery ice floor can fuck right off. So given that I love the snow and ice look, this game is very visually appealing to me. The look of the game brings us to the graphics. I started gaming when you could literally get up close to the TV or monitor and count how many pixels made up the character, and graphical advances were mind-boggling for a while. Now, in 2022, with recent games like Horizon Forbidden West and Elden Ring, you may wonder, could I enjoy a game that relies on graphics from a bygone era? Some of you might be listening to this and be thinking, are you fucking mad? Have you been asleep to the whole indie game pixel art movement? And the answer is no. I've not been asleep to it, I've deliberately ignored it. And I doubt I'm alone in that. For decades at this point, the gaming media has emphasised progress, gameplay, graphics, price points. Combine that with the limited time and money to enjoy video games, and it did feel difficult to justify taking a chance on something that was below the AAA standard for graphics. And that goes doubly so for PC. It's very easy to get caught up in the idea that you need the latest graphics card to get any enjoyment whatsoever out of a video game, and if you're paying all that money for a graphics card, surely you have to buy games that justify having it. I think The Long Dark has managed to hit a real sweet spot in terms of gameplay. I like the theory of flow states, which says that when you're doing something that's within your skill set but provides a challenge, good times will be had. Another way is saying that it's not too hard and it's not too easy. There are of course different difficulty levels that you can adjust for your own skill level, but I find the second difficulty level to be the best balance. So where does the challenge come from? As I said earlier, one mistake, like getting caught outside all night with no shelter, no means to keep yourself warm through the night, and God forbid there be a snowstorm, and you're dead. And this is a permadeath game. You die, you lose your entire run, which includes your skill leveling, all your equipment, and all your food storage. I once lost a 110-day character to doing something really stupid, and I can tell you, it fucking sucks. Although, given it's a permadeath game, it's forgiving. For every lost run, I've had 10 incidents where I survived some terrible event and realised that it could have been much worse. Of course, you don't always appreciate the issue of death early on until it happens to you, and you realise how hard you worked to build up your collection of gear only to lose it all. There's a real sense of loss when a run ends, but it gives you a reason not to Leroy Jenkins your way through the game. So how do I describe the gameplay? It's first person, and there are guns in the game, but this is no first person shooter. Shooting's a tiny part of the game. Your main character was not a soldier or a hunter, and in the beginning barely seems to know how to operate a gun. Ammo is scarce, your aim is bad, and wild animals are tough. Even if you do score a hit, you might only succeed in pissing off whatever you were shooting at, and you might end up worse off for it. This is an exploration game first and foremost. The world is an interesting one with a lot of cool locations, none of which I'll tell you about here because the exploration and discovery are a joyous part of the game. There's also a crafting system for basic resources, from simple things like bandages and tinder plugs, all the way up to items of clothing made from the tough pelts of animals inhabiting the island. Put all these together and the result is a game that doesn't play like any other game I've played. I'm aware there's other open world survival and crafting games out there, and I don't pretend to be an expert on this particular genre. I did play Stranded Deep a little bit, which has a very picturesque tropical island setting. There are a number of common themes, but in Stranded Deep there's more of a focus on base building, whereas in The Long Dark you're more nomadic. Building a base in The Long Dark is theoretically possible, as you can build a snow shelter out of sticks and cloth, storage bins out of stones, and a campfire. However, this would be a fairly wasteful strategy given how much wood would be required to keep the campfire burning to keep the cold and the predators away. Instead, The Long Dark seems to play out best when you base yourself in one of the many abandoned structures around the map and rely on snow shelters and caves only as a last resort when caught short moving between locations. There's an unavoidable sense of vulnerability in The Long Dark, and this keeps things interesting. In gaming, you're frequently a badass, either right from the beginning or you become one over time. That's unlikely to happen in The Long Dark unless you play long enough to become elite. Alternatively, there's a lot of YouTube videos out there that can show you how to take advantage of the way the game's systems work. I would avoid these personally. The game is challenging, but it's not Dark Souls, and if you remove all challenge from the game, you're not likely to enjoy it for very long. It'll just be too easy. Unless that's what you want, in which case go for it. So let's talk about the end goal, or lack thereof in survival mode. How can a game that doesn't have any missions, or even a singular end goal, hold a player's attention and stop them from getting bored? That's a great question. How does this game dish out the little dopamine hits that keep you going with a single "congratulations, you completed this task"? Well, the way this happens changes as you spend time with the game. At first, there's the thrill of exploration. You can find a new building you can sleep in, you can find a new piece of clothing with better stats than what you currently have, you can find a new tool or weapon. But of course, all the varieties of things are finite in this game, and you can't keep finding new things forever. But by the time you've reached the stage of having seen all the varieties of thing in the game, including the rare and unique items, then you'll find enjoyment from starting to become quite good at the game. You'll start to get to the point where you've got a very good set of gear that'll keep you warm in all but the coldest of conditions, allowing you to explore further and start to fill in those blank corners of the map. You might unlock a door that holds a rare crafting facility behind it. You might take down one of the game's larger beasts, which rewards you with a rare crafting material. And you'll find that you'll have set your own goals as opposed to ones that the game gives you. Making a run to a far-flung edge of the map because it's the only place you can replenish a particular supply. Go purposefully hunting for a high-value animal for food or crafting materials. Improve your skills to make yourself more efficient with your ever-dwindling resources, or make one of the long journeys to a remote location, which usually ends with some plunder. I've seen some skilled players on YouTube boasting things like 1500 days survived and immense stashes of loot to show for it. Flaws? It's an indie game and there are a few bugs. I once had a bear pop into existence about 10 feet in front of me and promptly shit myself. PC is probably best for performance, but I've been playing recently on PlayStation because it's part of the PS Now collection which I subscribe to. Although I'm playing on PS5, it's the PS4 version of the game which has a bit of a limited draw distance, which can be annoying, but it tends to be things like plants popping in wide open areas as opposed to, for example, an entire building. Still, pop-in is annoying as hell. Bring on the next gen version of the game. Or I could just play on PC, but that would involve me getting off the couch, and Scotland isn't a former heart attack capital of the world because we like to move around. Putting flaws aside, and you very much can put them aside because of how good the rest of the game is, this game does keep bringing me back time and time again since I first bought it in 2017. I'm not saying this is the last game you'll ever have to buy, everything gets boring eventually, but this game is extremely good and has the same comforting quality as an old TV show. I find myself, as with a few other games, playing it for a while, going on to something else, but coming back to it. My two main criteria for a game that gets my absolute recommendation are either couldn't stop playing it till I completed it, or I keep going back to over new games. The Long Dark is the latter, as the survival mode isn't something you complete in a traditional sense. The level of engagement that this game draws from you is very high, even in spite of the flaws, few though they are. The control system is straightforward, which adds to the pick up and play quality of the game, meaning there isn't the feeling of, I haven't played this game for a while and I'll be shit until I remember how the controls work and how to parry and counter-attack, etc. Which I think can be off-putting in some games, particularly some modern AAA games, which robs them of the ability to be picked up again for a quick casual session. That's not to say I don't like games with more complex controls, and a few of them will be appearing on my list. Although The Long Dark can be pick up and play for a casual play, that doesn't mean the game's only good for quick and casual sessions. It definitely has that civilization quality of one more turn or one more day in The Long Dark. So all in all, this game is brilliant. As of right now in 2022, the latest update brought the Black Rock region, which includes some really interesting locations and challenges, which I will leave for you to play. Going forward, the developers Hinterland have said they will be looking to make updates paid ones, which is entirely fair enough. They've given us 8 years of free updates, including new content so far. I'm inferring that if future updates will be paid DLC, there will be substantial updates, new large areas or new game modes that would be most welcome. On the point of new game modes, they do have some specific challenge modes, including Escape the Darkwalker, which I haven't played because this game is spooky enough without me being actively hunted. But I do wonder if some developers are missing a trick by making these gorgeous, lovingly crafted open worlds, but they're used only for a single story and that's the end of it. It seems a bit wasteful. What we'd like to see, if they're asking, is a new twist on the survival element, such as a zombies mode, like the Undead Nightmare for the original Red Dead Redemption. I think that already existing feelings of isolation and occasional dread in The Long Dark would be heightened with something like that. It would also mean that the indoor locations wouldn't feel as safe as they do. There are some really creepy abandoned buildings in this game, but you know they're safe. But what if that was no longer a given? Just a thought. So that's this arsehole's opinion, and also some wild speculation thrown in as a bonus. Buy The Long Dark. You won't regret it, and if you do, well, that's subjectivity for you. I don't really know how YouTube works from the creator's side, but apparently the done thing is for me to invite you to like, comment and or subscribe, so please do all three of those things. Happy gaming.